Okay, welcome to my introduction on how to create liveries, in particular using Substance Painter. But this is going to be a demo that has a variety of ways to potentially author a livery. I'm going to focus on Substance Painter. One of the users in the forums asked about if anyone's using Substance Painter, and that's my workflow. So I'm going to walk through all of it. I'm an industry veteran. I actually got my start texture painting on ants 30 years ago or 27 years ago. I was responsible for Fiona, a human Fiona on Shrek, and her groom, and I did all the look dev and texturing for her. I was a CG supervisor at DreamWorks for 20 years, 15 of them as a CG supervisor. I'm now head of CG at a studio and a VFX supervisor at a studio in Toronto. So what this livery painting gives me is some of that artist satisfaction that I haven't felt as a supervisor for some time. So this is definitely a relief for me. So I'm glad to share it with others. So I've got a little outline here. Being a good pilot, I have a checklist. And we're just going to go over some of the things to get going here as a general outline of what we're going to be covering. And I'll return to this at various points during the demo. So the first thing you're going to want to do is you're going to want to get Blender 3.1. We're going to be using an older plugin for our to get our model in. I prefer it for texture paint work. So you're going to go to Downloads. Just to clarify that, there's a newer plugin that is on the MSFS site, the official forum site or whatever, that they, I think it's in the SDK or something. In the SDK section, there's a portion that has a plugin for doing this type of work, to work with Blender. But that's really good for scenery work, and I really prefer this one for doing texture work. So if you want to use the other one, you can, but you're going to have to watch a different demo. So once you come to Blender here, you go up here to Releases, and you can find the old 3.1 release, and you're going to want to download and install this version. Then, and I will include all of my links, as well. I'm going to share some Photoshop actions that I will also include a Google Drive link for anyone who wants it. So then we have MFS to blend is the version of the plugin that we're going to be using. Again, we're not going to use the newer plugin. We're going to use this old one by Best Danny's GitHub. And he's got a great instruction here in terms of how to get it installed and get it working. I'll talk a little bit about that in a moment, but you'll want to download this and install it. You're also going to want to grab the MSFS texture toolbox. This is a set of PowerShell scripts that have various functions, and they are a lifesaver. They do a lot of the file conversion stuff can get a little tricky, and this batch process is fantastic. And it's totally safe, even though it uses ImageMagick, which has some security concerns. I investigated and looked into it. The scripts are all good from what I can tell, and I've never had any problems. I've been using them for a while. So there are vulnerabilities with that, but this isn't exploiting those at all. These aren't exploiting those at all. So, and then Paint.net, which is an app. So you're not going to find Paint.net at Paint.net. You're going to find it at getpaint.net. Paint.net is a different thing. And you're going to want to download this. And this is just a great general utility. And you can actually quickly execute liveries. So for instance, just kind of jumping the gun a bit, if we were to get into one of our existing liveries, there's nothing that would stop me from, one moment. There would be nothing stopping me from grabbing an existing livery, double-clicking on this, and this opens up Paint.net, and copy-pasting that, and then saving that back out to that livery. So you can copy this, or you can paint in here as well. But if you wanted to move this to another program, I use Affinity Photo, and you can copy-paste between that. I also use Photoshop, which I'll demo in a bit here, but. In any case, if you want to just shortcut way to do liveries, you could just do them this way. But I'm going to show you a more robust way to actually author them. So, but you want to grab Paint.net, and I'll talk a little bit about that. I just glazed over that, but we'll come back to that in a minute. Let's go ahead and so go ahead and download that, and that's just a handy tool for using DDS files. The main thing is that when you save DDS files, there are certain considerations about color space that handles for you. Sorry, I'm trying to find my way back to my livery. So if I go back here, you know, when you go to save these things, the type of file type it is here matters a lot. And these are direct draw surfaces. Finding apps that write to DDS files is not trivial, and this works really well. I'll explain the differences between these and what you need to save as and whatnot. I will go over all that, but grab that download. So we're just going over the downloads here. So okay, now I guess I'm going to go ahead and just do a quick talk through of this. So let's say I just wanted to work on this livery. The main thing to know is that when you're saving albedo maps, which are your color data, when you save, so if I were to here, let me just open up Affinity Photo here for one moment, and I'm going to copy this, and you can then, so I've copied this into the buffer. If I go new from clipboard, it's going to open up here. I can do all this work. I can then select all, copy. So let's say I was to, paint something here, copy it, and then I could paste it back into this buffer, and then I could just save it out here. And the important thing to know is that when you're saving an albedo, you want to save it as this BC1 RGB format. So the second one, I guess it is. And that's because it's an sRGB. So there are two different, just to talk about this linear versus a 2.2 gamma, RGB maps have a gamma applied to them. And that's because your eye is way more sensitive to darker values than it is brighter values. So there's no sense in having a color space where you have uniform distribution. We want more range at the lower end of the spectrum. So a long time ago, we started applying a 2.2 gamma to all RGB files. Now, the thing is that sometimes an RGB file is data. It's actually 0 to 1 data, and it's very important that it doesn't get scaled in any way, that it stays the way it is, and that's a linear file. So you could either have an sRGB, which is getting a 2.2 gamma applied, or a linear file. Now, when you save normal maps, you're going to come down here to BC5 linear unsigned, and I'll show you that in a second. Actually, let me show you an example of a data type that you need to save as that linear space would be these comp files. So in PBR texturing and photorealistic rendering, physically based rendering, PBR, this uses packed textures for Microsoft Flight Simulator, and these packed textures are ORM maps, occlusion, roughness, metallic maps. So what that means is they're taking the red channel and they're storing the occlusion data in that channel. The green channel contains the OR roughness, and the blue channel contains the metalness or metallic property. We're going to split these out for the purpose of painting on them, but were you to do some work on these, and let's say you brought this, let's say I grabbed this and I brought this into Affinity Photo and I pasted it in here, and then let's say I applied some sort of curve that is only affecting, let's say I wanted to make this plane super metallic, let's say, or super shiny. So I would take the green channel, which is the roughness, and you would decrease the roughness, which is going to make it shinier. It's going to make those parts shinier. So then, I could merge that back in. I can then copy and I can paste that back into. It looks like I did that wrong. I think I was on the wrong pass there. Is that? Yeah, that's this pass. So I was just on the wrong. And then I just painted into that. So if I copy this, Control C, and then I Control V, just drop it back in. Where I then want to save this out, I would hit save, and it's going to bring up this dialog. And then what you would want to pick is you'd want to pick the linear, because those values need to stay in that 0 to 1 space, or not in 0 to 1, but it needs to. It's data. It's you're multiplying against that, or you're operating. It's percentages or whatnot. It's not color data. You don't need the range. And then finally with normal maps, don't save that. So these are norms. So if you paint normal maps, which you would typically do through Substance Painter, but let's say you like, you know, somebody else's normal maps or something. Just to explain it, what you would do is you would go to save, and what you'll know you'll get the right one because you should see a pretty big color change. It's going to go green here when I select this one, and you're going to save it out as that. And basically I think what that's doing is it's stripping it down probably to 2 channels so that you end up with the R and the G, or I'm not exactly sure. I'm not familiar with TDS schemes or anything like that. So, but anyway, that's how you would want to save those up. And that's a really easy way to just do livery work. You don't have to get into any file manipulation. You can just download one, add, sometimes I'll just add faux flights to a livery just to, like on my Pilatus PC21 video, I just threw faux flights in there. I didn't have a livery for it, but I wanted something a little custom. So I just did a little custom work, threw my logo on and whatnot. So yeah, that's just a really quick way to handle liveries. But we're going to be doing actual texture paint work. So I'm going to go ahead and get this guy out of here, and that's enough for the files. And I will put links to all of this in the video description. And so now what we're going to do is we're going to fire up our Blender 3.1. So we've downloaded Blender, we've installed it, we downloaded the plugin, we've got that available to us, and then you're going to follow those instructions to install that plugin. You're going to come up here to Preferences, and you're going to go to the Install, and you'll install it. And what you should have when you're done is you should have a MSFS GLTF importer right here. That's what you're going to want to see. If you see something other than this, you grab the wrong plugin or the wrong version of Blender or something. And then when you're ready to import your model, I'm going to work on the Skyhawk 172. I have a livery I want to do. I'm going to work on the Asobo model. So I'm going to come down here and I'm going to say import. And down at the bottom here, you should see MSFS GLTF. And when you click on that, you should see over here a little pull down window. And if you don't see this, it means you grabbed the wrong plugin again. So you're going to want to go to convert original textures. We're going to convert textures from the Skyhawk so that we have kind of a base layer to work against. And then what we're going to do is we're going to go to the model directory. So just in terms of where the models live, let me show you where that is. So we're going to go to our packages directory. So if you go to your Microsoft Simulator root folder, there's packages. Depending on so if you're working on a mod that you downloaded, like let's say you downloaded the Kodiak and you didn't get it through the store and it's in your community folder, you go through your community folder. I know that the asset I want to work on is in the Asobo official packages. So if I go down here, I'll find the C172 Classic. I'm going to go ahead and double click on that. I'm going to go to Sim Objects, and you're going to get very familiar with Sim Objects and Layout JSONs. I'm going to go to Sim Objects, I'm going to go to Airplanes, and that's a sad thing. I do not like being familiar with those things. They're a pain in the ass to work with. So Textures and Models, and by the way, if anybody has an easier way throughout my demo to work on any of this, please, by all means, suggest it. There's probably tools out there for managing them. I'm starting developing some Python scripts to manage some of this stuff because honestly, the texture painting is not the hard part. It's all the file management. So, okay, so we go to the model directory. I'm going to try to stay focused here. And you're going to find interior LODs and you're going to find exterior LODs. And you can jam these together. You could bring them both into Blender and create a common model or whatever. I'm just going to go ahead and grab the base LOD for the Cessna. So LOD01 is your highest resolution. We're going to go ahead. I keep doing that. So we're not going to double click on it. We're just going to grab this path because that's what I was showing you in a browser. So you can figure out your way there. And I'm going to go ahead and grab this guy. I'm not going to grab the interior, and I'm going to go ahead and import this. Now what it's going to ask me is, where's the texture.config? Because it knows I told it I want to convert some textures. It wants to know where the texture.config is, which helps it path properly to all of the textures. So I'm going to go back to that. If you go to this recent section, that model that we were just in, we're going to go up a directory, and then we're going to go into texture, and there you should find your texture config. And we're going to go ahead and grab that. And then now it's asking, where do you want me to put these textures? I'm going to do a bunch of conversions of direct draw DDS files to PNGs. Where do you want them? So what I'm going to do is, I have a livery section. And I keep my MSFS toolbox there. I've got resources in terms of textures that I bring into Substance Painter that I rub onto the model and do work through, alphas and whatnot. And then I have, paint kits is empty. I don't find much use in paint kits, honestly. So under liveries, under C172, I've created a model directory that's empty. I'm going to dump my model there, but I'm going to dump my textures here. So this is where I wanted to put the textures. And so for the original textures, the source textures, we're going to put them right there. And we'll say import textures. And now this is going to take a moment. And just to show you, and also so that I do not lose track, we're just going to bring up my list here. So plugin walkthrough, generally I did that. Now we're importing with textures. So what we're going to do next, we're going to move the pieces out of the way without deleting. And what that is that don't delete anything. This stuff is rigged through a skeleton and whatnot. If you start deleting surfaces, you could potentially break the hierarchy. And then when you import the model in, it's you're going to say, why do I end up with half a plane? It's because when you export the FBX, it's gonna get confused or whatever. So I don't delete anything. I just move things around. If I don't want something to paint on, I'm going to move it around. And what we're going to be doing here is, so we've got our model in here. If we go up here and we turn on texture preview, we can see it brought in the textures fine. And now we got some work to do to move pieces out of the way. And the reason we're doing it is because there's some stuff we don't want to paint on, number one, and then there's some stuff that we don't want it to have occlusion calculated against it. So for instance, all of these lights have glass over them. So in substance, if I calculate occlusion, the interior light portions are going to get fully occluded. So all I do is I go over here and I just pull that stuff out of the way. There's a giant, so this I know that the Skyhawk has a custom piece of geo here that they use for easily assigning the textures. I'm moving that out. I'm not going to be using that. And honestly, I don't know how you turn that on and off. The livery that I'm using as a base has that in there in terms of turning that off. I could look into it. I just haven't really. I'm just starting with the Skyhawk. I'm not used to this kind of extra surface being in there. But in any case, that surface we're not going to use. And then what you'll find on most planes is there's a frost pass on everything. So if I click on the top surface here, and I look here in the name, this is the fuselage frost. So I'm going to move my frost passes all to the front. So if I grab on the front of the pants here, they have frost surfaces. I'm not going to be painting frost surfaces. There, you can see there's the blurred propellers. We don't care about those. I'm going to move those out of the way. And then actually, there's another one. So we'll move that out of the way. And then because things like nose cones and, nose cones, because they have different speeds, they're going to have different frosts as well. So there's going to be a couple frost passes here I'm anticipating. So here's the slow frost. I'll go ahead and move that out of the way. We're trying to get down to the nose cone. So there's the blurred frost. And you might, depending on how much you change the tips, you would, like if you do a color correction, let's say you want a colored nose cone, you'd want to color these as well, because when the plane starts up, it's going to shift to these, to representing these. So I generally only paint dirt and things like that on it. Still frost, and then now we're finally nose cone blurred. So that's the nose cone when it gets going without frost on it. It's going to be nose cone slow probably if I click here. Oh, nope, just still. Okay, great. So that is that. We'll move these nose cones out of the way. That's the more complete one there is the frost pass of the whole thing. And then we're getting pretty close here to being good. We're going to grab the wheels. So the wheels, I'm going to want to paint those. I'm not going to want occlusion determined with the pants on because it would give me like a weird shading pattern on my wheels, so I'm going to move those out of the way as well. And the wheels also have blurred surfaces. So if I grab this, it says left wheel. I'm going to move that just to the left. This is the right wheel blurred. I'm going to move it to the right so that all of my real wheels are on the left and my blurreds are on the rights. What did I just say? Blurreds, yeah, okay, blurreds on the left. So I'm actually going to grab these guys. I'm going to give them a little space, and that's because when I calculate occlusion, again, I'm going to do a bunch of edge detection and other stuff. I just don't want interference. I'm also going to do that for the nose cone and propeller. And that's because I want to get into that engine there. I don't want to have a static shadow from the propeller baked onto that. So I'm going to move that out of the way. And then as well, this plane, I don't want to paint, I don't want to have to paint too many of these liveries. So I'm going to remove the pants down, and that way I can work on these interior pieces, and they can also have occlusion calculated as if the pants aren't on, and then the pants would go on, and it would look great with the pants on, and it would look great with them off, and there's no problems. So this is getting pretty close. Let me go over here and just check my list one more time. All right, so let's say we did all this. We're now going to smooth the model. You can see it's got some faceting there. The way you do this, it's just a normal setting. We're not actually changing the topology at all. We're just going to go up here to objects. And again, I'm in the layout menu. If you just go up to object here, there's a shade smooth. And all that's doing is changing the attributes such that the normals, and normals are directions of surfaces along, there's vertex normals. Anyway, I don't want to get into normals. But in any case, this is not going to be CG 101 here. This is just going to be a livery demo. So that stuff's all great. Okay, so now we've done the smooth, and now we're ready to export. So we're going to come up here, and we're going to go to export. We're going to come down to FPX. And where I put these again is, if I go to my original textures directory, I've got a model directory I like to save these in. I'm going to call this Skyhawk. And if you hear my wife vacuuming, she's doing some construction out there, and so I apologize. She's hardcore. And my eyes are terrible, so FBX. All right, Skyhawk 001 FBX, we're going to go ahead and export that asset, and I also like to save my scene alongside of it. I'm going to call that also Skyhawk 001.fbx. Again. All right, great. We're going to save that out. Okay, so we saved our Blender file out. We can go ahead and close this up now. So I'm going to quit. And let me grab my outline or checklist. So now we're talking about texture splitting of ORM maps. So I already talked about occlusion, reflection, metallic. Because now, if you're using I'm using I'm using Substance Painter 2017. I have my own cut. I got familiar with it a long time ago. It's still handy for painting textures. I don't need the latest. There might be an easier way to set this up, but in terms of that kind of early version of Substance Painter, I need to split out these ORMs so that when I bring them in, I can paint on them and get them back out. It'll write them back out as stacked images, or as packed images, I should say, as ORM maps. But in terms of getting them assigned to the channels, the way I looked into it for 2017 is that's a nightmare. It's a weird concoction of things you need to do. I like to split them out. So the maps in particular that we are talking about here are, again, those maps that are going, typically they're called comp. Sometimes you will see them as PBR, or they'll have another type of naming convention. But they're these, generally they have a lot of orange in them. And that's because of that red channel is occlusion, and generally things aren't terribly occluded. So you always have a little strong red contribution. They're these funky colored looking maps. So what we're going to do is I've brought those over to my other machine that has Photoshop on it. I'm going to go ahead and come in here, and I have some actions that we're going to use. And I will put these are Photoshop batch actions. I will put a link to this in my drive so you can use it. But basically all this does is it takes the red channel, makes it a single channel image, and then writes that out. And so I'm basically just writing out the, it's an RGB image. Anyway, I'll give you these, and the way that these work is you're gonna go up here. We don't even have to open up Photoshop. We go up to Automate, we're gonna go to Batch, and I have a folder, so I'm going to select I have a Skyhawk source folder. You can see we've got a bunch of those images in there, and alongside it, I have a roughness, occlusion, and metallic, and this is where we're gonna be dumping these out. So I'm going to select the source folder. It's going to use all of the images in that folder. So that's it for this side of it. And then for the destination, we're going to go ahead. Let's say first we're going to do metallic first. So we select that folder. We change the prefix here to metallic. We want metallic underscore document name, and then the extension. It's going to save it out as it was, so it's going to be a PNG on the way out. Don't worry about the GIF. That's just an example. And let's see. So we're going to metallic. We're going metallic. Oh, and we need to change the action here to metallic. And then we go OK, and it's going to go bink, boop, boop. And it's convert all of these, and then we'll do it again for the next. So we're going to go up here. We're going to go automate, batch. We're going to pick let's pick roughness. We'll go RGH. We don't have to change our source folder. It's still the same source. And we'll go to RGH. I'm going to select that folder, and we're going to say, OK, it's going to go beep, boop, boop. Any of you familiar with Buck Rogers? You can make some tweaky sounds right now while you watch that. And then we'll go ahead and do the occlusion next. So we're going to go automate, batch, go down to occle, and we're going to go occle, and we're going to choose occle. And you can see those folders are filling up. So I'm going to go beep, boop, boop. Beep, 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 beep. What's up, Buck? And then, ta-da! So here we now have, under the Skyhawk folder, we have our occlusion maps, we have our metallic maps, and we have our roughness maps. So now we've exported that. Again, I'm going to put this action on a Google Drive link, and I will put it in the video. Again, it's not anything crazy, and I've done this work in Affinity Photo as well. You can, I think, do it just as well. I'm just less familiar with some things, so if I know something better in my professional tools, I just use those. So then when I'm all done with that, what I do is I download, I put those in with my original textures. So now I've got my metallic occlusion roughness, and we can go ahead and close that up. And now we're ready to fire up Substance Painter. So I'm going to launch Substance Painter. And we'll keep this original textures available to us because we're going to go ahead and drag that stuff in. So I do not want a latest version. I'm going to go up here to new. I am, the template we're going to be using is the metal roughness. Again, this is probably a super old version that looks very foreign to any of you using the new one. We're going to go to our model directory. We're going to grab our Skyhawk. I'm just going to keep this stuff the way it is. I'm going to go to maybe 2K maps, and I can change it after the fact, and I'm just going to say OK. And now it's going to bring in my lovely model, and we are all good. So let's now go and check our to-do list. So we are now into Substance Painter. We've imported the model, and now we're going to rename texture sets to conform to exported passes. And what that means is if you look at these maps, they have names like fuselage, lights, rivets, prop slow, prop blur. If you look over here, there's this thing landing, and there's no landing here. The texture sets need to correspond to the pass names, and they don't always. The texture sets are named after the materials that came in with the asset. In theory, they should have. This is kind of a Sobo slop here. Like these are material names that do not conform to the passes, so your materials which get imported as texture sets need to conform to what you want to export because it's going to be in the name. So for instance, I know that the landing is actually struts, and that's because there is a struts texture in here. What is it? Airframe, wheels, WQRS struts. So there's your struts. There was no struts in this list. That is the struts. Glass spots, there are no glass spots. It is all caps glass. Some of these are certain, like we don't care about the registration number. This one right here, I believe is a smoke effect or something. I don't care about that surface. It's mainly things like the props and things like that. You just want to go through and make sure, because when you export, these pass names are what get exported. So for instance, wheels blurred, I know that the file's not named like that. So what I want is, I want wheels blurred, all caps. And you just want to go through and just conform this stuff. This one's actually not that bad. Sometimes they're a little horrific. And I'm going to explain one more thing that happens. So wheel blurred. And if I misspell anything, don't be harsh on me. Wheel static. So, and that was, that's just because I've had to do this before. So wheel static, and then there's windshield wings. So all of these are actually looking pretty good now. Fuselage props, these will actually export properly. So you want to go through and do that. It's going to save you a lot of hassle later on. The other thing you're going to want to do, and the Skyhawk doesn't really have any examples of this, but I'll kind of talk you through what it is. You want to check for materials that use the same texture map. Sometimes in here, so for instance, it could be the case that you have like struts, and maybe there's like struts underscore rubber. Let's say they decided to create a separate material for the rubber portions of the struts. But let's say they're utilizing the same texture map. That's really what you care about. You need to get all this stuff so that any materials that are using the same texture map, that you go into, what I do is I go into Maya and I start doing, I'll kind of inspect pieces. For instance, actually the struts aren't a bad example because they are a little weird because they didn't use the whole UV space. But if you see, there's a whole bunch of stuff missing here. And usually what this would be indicative of is that there's some surface that is, or some texture set that's using this same texture, that's using this struts texture that's named something else. And the problem is that if I import that in and I paint on all these, when I go to export, it's going to export one texture for both of those, and they're going to stomp each other because I will have painted on one, and then I'll have painted on another texture set. In any case, you need to get the stuff all onto the same page. And the way you do that is you don't really care about the materials. You're not going to be changing the materials. So doing the reassignments in Blender or whatever, where you're basically getting it down so that you want all of the textures assigned to the parts for which they're going to be used. You don't care about the materials. So hopefully that makes sense. I don't have a great example to kind of walk you through. It's something you want to do early in this step here, because if you find that out later, it gets to be really problematic. You want to kind of shore this whole thing up and get everything kind of squared away as you go. Don't jump to the next set until you really kind of feel like you've done what you need to do. So now we can go ahead and bake texture sets. So, and what that means is that there are procedural aspects that, like dirt and crack and wear. Everybody goes nuts over these textures. But a lot of times, a lot of the stuff is procedurally generated. So little cracks and chip paint and stuff can be determined from curvature. We're going to turn off ID because I don't have any vertex ID. But if you did, well, anyway, this is more substance. I don't want to get into like a substance demo here. So in any case, I'm going to go ahead and say bake all maps. We'll just do it super low res so that it just cranks through them all. And typically I do them like 4K for most of them. These don't get exported out. These are really for driving procedural textures inside of substance. So like it uses all of this edge detection and curvature maps and occlusion to do things like put on wear on the most exposed surfaces, right? Or on like the finest cracks where you have a high rate of curvature change and things like that. These aren't, people who go in there and rub a lot of like crack into things or whatever. A lot of the really high detail stuff that you see comes from these procedural workflows. So it always cracks me up when people talk about how great the livery is and how much like stuff is in there and stuff. And I'm like, yeah, there's a lot of stuff in there that just comes really easily. You have to know how to use the tools, but tools are doing a lot of the heavy lifting here. So I'm not going to make you guys watch all of this. I'm going to go ahead and pause the video for a second. Okay, so this is wrapping up. And what I want to say is the reason you want to get the naming stuff all squared away up front is because when you bake all these textures and whatnot, these are now using those part names, those data set names and whatnot. So you can see now I have kind of an occlusion here. Let me make this a little bit prettier. So I'm going to come down here into my display settings and we'll get a nice background in there. There's a nice sky, and we'll turn up the opacity, turn on the blur. So, okay, great. So and then I have my texture set settings. So I could go through here and say things like, okay, for the fuselage, we're going to go ahead and set this to be 8K or 4K, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Anyway, this isn't going to be a substance demo because you're going to have a later, more recent version of substance. But in any case, here's the playing with all of those data paths. And you can see you're getting soft occlusion there. That's gonna play right into your maps and whatnot. So now what we do is we're gonna import our textures. So let's bring our checklist back over here. We just did this rename of the sets. We did the baking of the data sets. Now we're gonna import our source textures. And what this is gonna give us our base. So let me get a new shell here. And we're going to go to our livery section, liveries, C172, original textures. So we don't want the comp maps. So actually, let me go ahead. Let me do this. Let's get rid of these guys. So we're just going to grab all these guys. Yep, let's delete those. Skip it. I think I've got, it looks like I've got probably that image editing program open with one of them or something. Actually, let me cancel that. What is going on here? What did I just do? Okay, in any case, those are gone. Well, the main reason is because we're going to bring these guys in for in their stead. So we're going to go ahead and grab a bunch of these things. Actually, we'll grab albedos and normals. Let's just grab all of it. We'll do it live. All right, we're going to grab all that, drop that in. It's going to bring up this dialog. I'm now going to come back and I'm going to add these guys as well. So we'll grab these and we'll grab these occlusion maps and we will grab these roughness maps, and these are going to provide the base for our aircraft. So, and then if I was to select all of these, and we're not going to set this all up, I'll just show you on the fuselage or something. But we can flip all of these to texture, and we can put them in C172 or tag them with C172, and we'll put them in the current session and we'll import in. So I'm going to import these into a shelf here, and now if I type in here C172, I get those maps up. And you can see I've actually got duplicates now. It's because I've been saving some actually to the shelf, like the interior shelf. So anyway, so how do we apply these? So what I do is I delete the base layer. So I've got fuselage here. I'm going to create a fill layer, and then now the other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add. And again, this you probably don't have to do this. I would have to go ahead and add as a channel ambient occlusion because I'm going to plug in ambient occlusion. I don't actually care about height on these. So now I've got AO here. So now with the fill, you're going to watch what's going to happen with the fuselage here. If I sort by fuse, okay, there we go. So now here's the color data. Oh, by default it's pretty lame. It does a 3x3 tiling in the 2017 version. Who would want 3 as a default for your UV space tiling? So you set that back to 1. We're going to go ahead and drop that on. We're going to go ahead and drop our normal map on. We're going to drop our metallic map. We're going to drop our roughness. And we're going to drop our occlusion in there. And why is this not showing up? What is going on here? Super strange. What's going on? Is that just a display error? It might be calculating. Why is that not showing up? Oh, is it because that's just it's because that is showing up. It's a white plane underneath. I forgot that we don't have, so let's do the tail. I think the tail's got some textures on it. So I'm sitting here going like, what's going on? Where's my, all right, let's do the same thing we did for the tail. So we're gonna go ahead and add ambient occlusion. We'll go ahead and remove height. We'll put in, instead of fuse, we'll put in tail. And this is just putting the base coat on. Again, we're gonna change the stupid default sorry, this is, we need to get rid of this and we need to put in a fill layer. So the fill layer is just gonna give us our base. So we're basically filling it with the base texture. So if I go pure into base color, I want the normals, I want the metallic, I want, oh, look at that. So tail, we want tail landing. All right, let me make sure these are right. So tail landing norm. That's right, tail landing albedo. And then we want the, oh, we already got the metallic. We want the occlusion. And we want the roughness. And now let's take a look at our tail. Yep, there you go. So now you got your tail is showing up there. In any case, then what you would do then is you would add a, what I would do is I would add a layer on top of that, and then I'm now in painting, and I'm into painting my textures. So, and this is just, I had accidentally pulled one of these over. So anyway, you do all your texture painting, you do whatever you're gonna do. And then let's see here. So set up fill layers for base, import textures to be applied, configure a custom exporter. Okay, so now we've done our painting, we're ready to do our export. So what you're going to want to do is you're going to want, and this is going to depend on your version of Substance, is you're going to want to create a custom config. So I've created an MSFS packed config, and let me show you what that looks like. So if I go here to MFS packed, what I'm doing is I'm taking normal, PBR, and A. You could change this to comp, so it exports properly with the comp name instead of, and you could put albedo, and you could put norm, and you could export these this way. It just depends on the livery. And then your albedo, you want an RGBA. For the comp, what I did is you see it's red for the composite, so it's going to be ORM, right? So you're going to look for occlusion, so ambient occlusion. So here's ambient occlusion, and then we've got roughness, and then we've got the metallic. So the channels are getting written out. What you do is you drag these up into those slots. So, and you want to configure it so that it's ORM, and then you want to output. You want to grab the normals and output the normals, and you just grab the normal and drag that up there. And that's the exporter that you're going to want. So then we'll go ahead and export textures, and it will export them. I didn't configure my directory. I have no clue where these are getting exported to. In any case, you would export these out. And then you're now looking at the Toolbox conversion tool. So I'm just going to pause this for 1 sec, and then I'll get to the conversion tools. Okay, great, and that export's done. I actually redid it. I exported to a folder that was proper. So if you go to Liveries now, and we go to, I've created a Substance export. What you find is it exported all the data there. And because we didn't connect most of these, that's why most of these are blank. It's just using the data maps, but there's no actual texture data. But you could see that the tail landing exported with the textures that we painted. So now what you'd want to do is you'd want to use the MSFS texture toolbox. So let me just walk through that set of power scripts. So I go over here to Livery. I've got my MSFS textures toolbox. Click on that. We've got a couple of different PowerShell scripts. So the split ones don't work. That's why I have to go to Photoshop and do my actions. There's some sort of conversion tool that ImageMagick no longer packs in there. I don't have a version with it. I haven't really had to deal with it. It's really a deal breaker for you. If you open this in any sort of text editor, you'll see there's like a convert in here somewhere, and it'll complain when you run the script. In any case, if you want to dig into that, be my guest. As well, I've copied a couple of these because, for instance, the Kodiak was naming things different ways, and these conversion tools operate off of string patterns. So it looks for comp, N, normal, albedo, whatever it's named. So in this case, with the Skyhawk, let's see here. So if we go back to faux flights, livery, and we just go to the original, sorry about that. It's getting late. C172, and we go to the original textures directory. The naming convention is ALBD, norm, and comp. So what you'd want to do is it's gonna do a PNG to DDS conversion, but if it doesn't find the the types. So there's, it will complain. Here, actually, let me just show you. All right, so let's just go ahead and try it. We'll see what happens, and then I will show you how to manipulate it when it goes wrong. So what you're going to do is you're going to hit your Windows key. It's happening over on my other screen. I apologize. And you're going to type in Windows PowerShell. Sorry. PowerShell. There we go. And you're going to run as administrator. And you're going to say yes. And it opens it back up. So now we've got a Windows PowerShell here. This is just default Windows stuff. So if I go to d:/faux flights livery work livery ms toolbox, and I do a listing in here, and you can see I'm a Unix list. I didn't do dir. I'm a Unix user. So you'll find that these are the scripts here, and we're going to do PNG to DDS. So these are super easy to use. And it does it. You don't have to open it up and do it the way I said it. It will query you and ask you what each one is if it doesn't recognize the extension. It's just sometimes with a lot of textures sitting there and just entering those is a pain in the ass. And so I manipulate them. So I'm going to say run once, and then I'm going to give it the path. So if I go to my liveries, and I go to my C172, and I go to my substance export directory, this is what I'm going to give it. And it's going to generate the DDS files there. And actually, you can see the naming conventions are proper. So it's finding the ALBD. But let's say that the developer let's say the Kodiak had A instead of ALBD. Or let's say it had C, or let's say, I think it had PBR instead of comp. So you would have to sit here and with every comp one that it hits, or every PBR one that it hits, it would go, is this a comp? Is this a norm? Is this an albedo? And you'd have to sit here and you'd have to respond on each one. And that's why I create different versions of the script. And all you do is you open it up and you see what it's looking for and you just change it. So if it's looking for if it's looking for ALBD and it's A, you just change it to A so that when the script runs, it's searching for the right pattern. In any case, if that's way over your head, just run it and it'll query each one and you just got to tell it each one. So I'm going to go ahead and, this will also create all the JSON files. So this is creating everything that you would need for your texture directory is going to go in here. So let's go ahead and, while this runs, let's go back to our checklist and see where we're at. So you can also, if you remember when I used Blender to import the model, it converted the DDSs to PNGs under the hood. So it imported the Skyhawk and it converted all the textures for me. If you didn't want to do that, let's say you had a livery that you just want to convert, for whatever reason, you want to convert them to PNG, do some work on them or something, you can just use DDS to PNG. There's a script in there, so you can run it on existing livery to generate PNGs from the DDS files. The nice thing about using these scripts is that they properly handle the color space issues that I walked through you with the paint.net script. This does all of that. Now, when we're done this, and after this is done, what we would need to do is we would need to then configure our livery. I'm going to go ahead and continue to let this run, and then I'm going to go ahead. I'm now going to show you kind of how to set this up into a livery and show you kind of how I do that. So if I go to an existing livery, I've downloaded a classic blue-orange version of the C172. I like to start with an existing livery that's working, so I'll go grab one off of flightsim.to, bring it in, that generally looks like it's probably covering some of the same things. And then it's a world of hurt. It's a nightmare dealing with all this data management. That's why I want to script it a bit more. So where you're going to want to dump your textures, you're going to want to dump them into the texture folder. And the way this, I'm going to be methodical about this actually. So let's first just talk about if you go to the base directory, you've got the layout JSON. So what the layout JSON is it is just, you just have to let it know which textures you're adding. So if you have, let's say, I know that I have, let's say I know that I'm painting on this surface and it's the floaters, but let's say now I'm doing the struts let's say this livery doesn't have the struts and I painted on the struts. I want to add it to the livery. I'd create a new thing. I'd paste it here. I would do a replace of floaters with strut. I'd replace all, and then I would paste 2 more in here. And I know I like to paint normals, and I like to paint. So we need you need it for the JSON and the DDS, and then this would be comp. So I like to paint the comp. So let's say I had these struts. I wanted to add them to this livery. I would grab this stuff, copy, and I would go ahead and just drop this in here. And that assumes that those files exist. That assumes that you just ran this script and it generated those files. That's how you would add them to this livery. You drop this into here. And the important thing to know is syntax matters a ton in here. So if you don't see your livery when you launch, it's probably something in this layout JSON that is off. It'll be that there's a typo. You have to be aware that at the bottom, this last line cannot have a comma. So if you're appending to the bottom and you're cutting, pasting this stuff, you gotta make sure that this one would need a comma. So you should really leave the last line and just add to the bottom here. It just saves you that hassle. I would go slow on this and get one of them working, kind of figure out your stuff, and then you go from there. So once you have the layout JSON squared away, and that's easier said than done, in the sim objects, you can, I don't think, let's see. Yeah, you can also alter this. You can change the livery name to what you're going to name it and whatnot. I'm not going to walk through all this stuff. This stuff is a mess. It would be a longer demo. It's just something you're going to have to struggle through and figure out on your own. It's just finding the pairings. I'm going to explain to you the relationships though, so that should give you some guidance. So we've talked about the layout JSON. That is pointing at texture data, and that's going to point at your thumbnails and whatnot. Again, if you start with an existing livery, you can kind of work your way into this. I haven't done a ton of liveries, so I'm still hand cobbling these things and doing work that way. Kodiak was a bear, just because all the variants. So aircraft config. So if we go into that directory, you're going to see the aircraft config here. This is where you're going to want to set up your variation name. This cues off of the texture name. So see the BCO here, whatever your dot name here, that's the texture set is going to be looking for that, and the panel set. It's these appendages that it's looking for. So if it's just the default, you would just leave it like that. Because you're altering it and you're putting a dot, whatever, that's you want to make sure those conform. Yeah, there's I think the ID color still matters, but some of that stuff is in the panel now. So I don't think this drives the livery color now. There's some liveries change the panel. So the panel is the registration. So there's like things like the number on the dash, the number on the side, the number on the wing. Those will be enumerated as these V paintings, these virtual painting items. And you can change the color by putting in hex. There's a handy dandy hex to binary converter, and you can convert. You need to put in hex numbers. So like, let me show you actually. So inside of, if I go to this color picker and I go down here to RGB hex, you can see when I pick a color, so it's the RGB hex is this, the 3068. So, or I could take these RGB values and I could plug them into a hex, RGB to hex calculator. But anyway, you want to get the hex color, and then it would be font color equals, and I think is it pound, I think it's pound. And I think it's like this. I think it's, not star. It's, where's pound? What am I doing? Gosh. I think it's pound. You might need to check another livery, but that's how you would specify a color instead of white, or you can use those white terms. In any case, the panel config is where those colors get changed. It'd be nice if I was certain for you for that. Let me just check 1 sec. I'll hit pause. Well, it's a good thing I checked because it's not bound. It's 0x is what it is. So 0x is what you want. So that would be, here, let me show you my reference here. So if you come down here, you see font color equals 0x, and then this is the hex test number. So that's the first two numbers is the R, the G, and the B, and that's not, those aren't the RGB values. Those are the hex decimal numbers that you need to drop in there. Or you could do default color equals black, like there's black and white are keywords. In any case, panel work is a pain sometimes to deal with. I'm not going to get into it too much here. I would say keep it simple and grow as you go. So let me see. Where's my master list here? So let's see here. So let me make sure. So we did aircraft config, and then now if you go to the texture directory, this is where we will have dumped all of our textures that were converted. So if I was to like say come over here and I go into the substance export, if we let's view details and let's see the type. So what you can see here is that we have JSON and DDS files, and then we have our original PNGs. So when you ran the PowerShell script, it generated these JSONs and these DDSs. You can copy and paste those then into your livery. So let's say I'm working on this livery. I could go ahead and paste this stuff here, and it would paste in. So, and that's, I think I just pasted from one type of plane to another. In any case, what I'm saying here is that this video got a little bit jumbly because I was jumping all around. The main point is that you want to dump those textures that are been converted back to DDS. You want to drop their DDS and their JSONs here, and any of those textures that you want to show up in the sim, you need to make sure that they are in the layout JSON. And these also have to be the ones that they are looking for. So like it's going to look for floaters. It's going to be looking for these types of textures because there are material bindings under there that were set up in 3D Studio Max or something at some point. So in any case, you just got to make sure that you have parity between the textures you're outputting and the names in the layout JSON. And then finally, one last thing that I want to show here with I was talking about the texture config. So if we go back into here, we go back into our textures, and we go to our texture config file. This is also where the thumbnail would live, and that thumbnail is also, so let me take a look at this thumbnail. So this thumbnail is also in the layout JSON. You need to have a reference to the thumbnail as well. But again, if you open up an existing livery, you're going to see these things. So if we open up a texture.config, what you'll see is that this is a series of fall throughs. So what it is that you're telling it where you want it to find textures. So typically these are small. This one's actually got a lot of stuff on it. Actually, let me go to our original packages here. And let's go, sorry, I'm going back to the Skyhawk here. Packages, sorry. I'm going back to the official folder, Steam. 172 Classic, Sim Objects, Airplanes, Classic, and texture. And if I go to the texture config, well, it's the same. Of course it's the same because I'm working on the Skyhawk. It's the same thing. In any case, basically what this is this is a way, if you notice, the only one of these versions of the 172 that has any texture data is this folder here. If I go back and I go into classic blue-orange floats and I go to texture, it's only got the floaters texture. And that's because its texture.config is telling it to use this place first to look for the textures. If it doesn't find them there, it's then going to look for them here, and then it's going to look for them here. And the textures it's looking for are the what it's looking for are textures that are named this, right? So, or not this, this, right? So what it's doing is it's telling it to which texture sets to use and how to fall through. So what that enables you to do is just have interior textures or have other type of textures getting imported at the same time. You don't have to configure this stuff too much. It's mainly if you open up an example like this, where you get a livery and you open it up, and when you get there, you start seeing, I think I already did floats. If I go to no pants, this probably doesn't have any textures in it because no pants is a removal of pants from this version. So what it's doing is for no pants, it's saying, use this texture set and then use this texture set. So it's using the WBSim classic, and then it's going to use this Asobo 172. And so that way, WBSim classic doesn't need to contain all the textures. It just needs to contain some. And for any that it's looking for that it doesn't find here, it's going to use these. So it's this fall through list. Again, you don't have to get super savvy with this. You just download a simple livery, start working. Eventually, you'll start kind of stumbling into this stuff as I have. It's clumsy. We're getting into Asobo stuff here. There aren't great tools for this stuff. Lastly, the panel config. Actually, let me talk about that, and then we're done the demo here. So, if we go into, not all airplanes have panel configs, or your liveries may not always have them. It may be that you just do texture work. But if you want to have a custom color, so let's say I'm going to do a blue plane, and let's say the panel stuff for the Skyhawk with the registration numbers, let's say it's green and it looks terrible on the thing. What you might want to do is have a custom panel color for that registration number. And the way you would do that is you'd have a panel, and you'd have a panel.config, and in there you'd have the V01 painting, which is the virtual painting 01, which is probably like the tail number, and one of these is probably under the wing, and you would change the font color here. This is where you want to change the font colors for the registrations and whatnot, and that's where you get into panels. And if you go into the Comanche, there's this whole HTML, and there's actually some dynamic scripts and whatnot. Go with stuff with simple for that's at the start. So in any case, at that point, it would be loading up into the sim, checking to see if your plane comes in. I would probably just change the layout JSON for one texture on an existing livery and see if you can get your texture to show up. So if you add struts, just add struts, go in and check, make sure it's showing up, and then you know how to set up the rest. Don't ever take any like giant steps here where you're altering these text files in mass. I would just do it progressively, do a little bit at a time, and work your way through it. And if all else fails, just start with a livery that's already working. So in any case, that's the length of this video. If you have other questions and whatnot, by all means, go ahead and ask them in the comments. I will also keep a pinned comment at the top of this tutorial that just talks through things that I may have forgotten that users are finding that I think is important. So you can check the top pin for stuff. As well in the description, I will include links to all of these apps. And hopefully this gets you into the world of livery painting. I didn't get into how I paint liveries in Substance Painter. I don't want to do a demo. It's 2017 version. Most of you are going to be using something like this. But this at least shows you how to get into the package you may be using. If you're using Mari, or if you're using the new Substance version or whatever, this would help you out. So cheers, and thank you very much.